hear me now? Good evening on a Friday evening. I have no doubt in my mind that several of you would rather be doing something else at this hour. So I want to acknowledge that you have chosen to be with us this evening on this very important occasion where the University of South Africa honors yet again for the 4th year running one of the stalwarts of our liberation movement in South Africa, and we are here today for the 4th Oliver Reginald Tambo Memorial Lecture. Welcome. How do you greet in different African languages? Dumelang, Abshani, Lochani, Sanibonani, Jambo? Okay, that's as far as I can go. Bon dia? Bonoit, thank you so much. Bonoit, thank you so much. Welcome, my name is Dr. Maureen Tong, and I have the honor to be one of the program directors tonight. I'm accompanied by my colleagues sitting right there at the table, and you will see them from time to time coming to take a particular role on the program. They are Mr. Xolile Gaba and Mr. Tlhoriso Molefe. Tonight is especially special for me personally, that we are hosting this lecture under the theme of integrating constitutionalism and ethical leadership to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures. What makes it especially special for me is that the keynote address is someone that when I was a law student at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, when I was growing up and looking at and wanting to be a lawyer myself and hoping that I'll emulate what he has become now, she was one of those people. Advocate Lenkabula was really one of those outstanding lawyers in Durban that young girls like myself could look at them and say, one day I want to be like her. So this is very special, absolutely special. So Ma'am Leah, and let me tell you a secret as well. I work in the office of the Vice Chancellor, and very often I find myself, in this role, looking for speakers, requesting notes, etc. For the very first time, we received the speech of the keynote address 1 week and 1 day ahead of time. It does not happen often. And I said to my colleagues, I told you, if you want efficiency, if you want diligence, if you want quality, you want Ma'am Leah Gaba speaking and being the keynote speaker. I'm told that there are many students in the room that are also attending, masters and doctoral students that are present. I invite you to take copious notes, because believe me, I read that speech, and it is very comprehensive, and there's a lot for you to learn from it. Tonight, I bring also greetings from our Vice Chancellor who could not be with us, Professor Lenkabula. As we speak, in fact, she's presiding over a graduation at ZK Matthews Hall. Such is the business of her schedule that these things happen, that the lecture is taking place today and she cannot be here. She sends her regards and she says she hopes that we'll have a really successful and fruitful lecture tonight. Another apology that I'd like to let you know of another person who would have loved to be here is our Chancellor, Dr. Thabo Mbeki. As I speak, he's also standing at ZK Matthews together with the Vice Chancellor attending to a graduation ceremony. Those two personalities would have been here if they could, but they are here with us in spirit and they are wishing us a very great lecture. The O.R. Tambo lecture is especially special to our Chancellor, Dr. Thabo Mbeki. I'm sure you know by now, for those that are regulars at the O.R. Tambo lecture, when we tell quite a bit of a history of his life and the journey that our Chancellor, Dr. Thabo Mbeki, has worked with Mr. O.R. Tambo through several years, when Mr. Tambo was the longest-serving president of the ANC, and he was his private secretary. So today is special. We have a great program. I don't want to waste too much time taking you through it. We will get into it. We apologize that we started slightly late. I can assure you that our keynote was like, when I'm running court, people start on time. I start the proceedings. If you are there and ready, it's your problem. So we are going to do our best to catch up for time that we lost in the beginning, and I promise you that we are going to have a great evening together. With not much ado, I'd like to hand over to my fellow program director who will proceed with the program going forward. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moring-Tong. Greetings. My name is Tlhoriso Colin Molefe, and I'm an employee of Unisa. That's as far as I can go. You know, this occasion always brings, I think, joy to my heart to say that some spirit lives on, because we must not forget the 10th president of the ANC, who's the longest serving member as well of the African National Congress, who returned to this country on the 13th of December 1990, but he couldn't stay long. But Ms. Masales, because we are in your house as Gauteng Regional Services, as also make sure that we are part and parcel of this occasion, I want you to come and be able to set the scene and give us the context about this particular program. Ms. Masales, if I may give you a brief background about her, she's the Regional Director of Gauteng Region, which comprises of Sunnyside, Ekurhuleni, Florida, Johannesburg, and Vaal. You can see that she's in the metros, which also says that she accommodates more than 100,000 students. Can we give her a round of applause when she comes to set the scene alight?
Thank you very much, Program Director. We recently had a golf day, and then I was actually complaining about adjusting the mic all the time. And now I have to adjust the mic again. Greetings to all of you in this event who came to grace us. My name is Moipone and Masales, as already been spoken. I would like to start by welcoming, I was thinking that the program director is actually going to introduce our guest, especially Advocate Lenkabula, a champion of constitutional law and human rights. We are blessed also to have Reginald Tambo, representing the Tambo family. And I would like to just mention the two, because they are the women, and the women that are running with a very big, serious baton. I'm going to leave my VPs with lots of love to be introduced in another area, and Natalie, also from the foundation where we started with you, you will be introduced properly. Colleagues, I must indicate that it's an honor for Gauteng Region, an honor to the university to have you today to come and commemorate with us O.R. Tambo, who is holding a legacy that will never be forgotten. Let me take you just a bit to the memory lane. When Gauteng Region, sitting in a smaller office, conceiving this idea of honoring O.R. Tambo, the first thing that we thought about was the student. We are actually commemorating and celebrating the life of O.R. as a student and as a leader in all respects. Let me quickly say that for us to align O.R. Tambo legacy with contemporary education, we are saying that his belief was much in the power of education as a tool for liberation. Members, please bear with me because we are honoring a great man. And honoring a great man, my setting of the scene, I would like to really talk a bit about how we have arrived at this mammoth kind of an event. O.R. Tambo was an educator, but then what is important is that O.R. Tambo was an educator before he became a freedom fighter, and he consistently championed education as a means to dismantle apartheid and build more equitable South Africa. Now, we want to just unpack how education as a tool for empowerment was seen by O.R. O.R. Tambo believed in the transformational power of education to uplift individuals and communities. During the apartheid era, education was used as a tool of oppression. I think for some of you can remember the policies of Bantu education. But then we find that in the preaching of O.R. Tambo, he actually wanted to dismantle the system and create opportunities to all South Africans to learn, develop, and contribute to the nation's growth. Post-apartheid society. Now, the big question that normally comes to us is to say, if he was still alive, what was his thinking with the current situation? We are still a marginalized communities, and the education that we are having, even in Unisa, 150 years and more, we still face challenges of inequality, of lack of access and resources, especially in rural areas. But in Unisa, access is very difficult for our students in terms of NSFAS and other means that they have to gain it. But then we go back to O.R. Tambo, a vision of him was inclusive education in deeply, which is really very deep today. And we find also that we actually conceptualize this to assist with the youth development in institutions, not only in Unisa. But let's look at the digitization today. And again, go back to the question that I was asking to say that, will O.R. Tambo support? He was a forerunner. As a forerunner, it means that he would be advocating currently for digital inclusion, especially in a world that is reliant on technology. What we're reading about him and what we know about him is that he was very proactive and then move along with the trends in the society, especially in education. What will he say about decolonization of education? This is what I really want to let it slip in your head. As my setting of the scene, I really wouldn't like to take much time of what you are going to listen about. But I just want to emphasize, especially for our SRC in our midst, our student in our midst, that O.R. Tambo had a firm belief that young people are key to building the future of the nation. This belief is reflected in his initiative during his time as ANC president. How much do we participate in educating our students? Because the ideas espoused in the belief of OR is that physical science, mathematics, and other disciplines have to be taken so serious, and it has to start with the youth. Currently, we are struggling to espouse the values of our communities and so on. You can imagine at this point in time whereby we are actually still struggling with our own languages. I'm very happy that within Unisa now we are emphasizing the part that we have to really teach and learn in our own languages. Because research has proven much that actually the people, when they use their own languages, can acquire better. In a society that is still struggling with the remnants of apartheid division, education has been seen by O.R. Tambo. It means it promotes the social cohesion and it instills respect for diversity and the healing of the historical wounds. Now I'm encouraging our master students and the students in our midst to say that there is a question on leadership. And the social ills that we are seeing currently, we always take it to leadership. And as a youth, as a student, how do you contribute to the leadership that you would like to see? Because I'm not going to prescribe to say that the leadership of so-and-so, but I can confirm with you that the leadership of O.R. Tambo was actually touching on each and every society. Now, in my conclusion, I would like you to enjoy the event because we are hosting you here. But I don't want you to forget to honor O.R. Tambo's legacy. We are here because we are honoring his legacy. I want to say also that we have to focus on Tambo's vision of saying, educate your children, educate the society, educate each and every person in your midst. I thank you very much. And Gasetswana re dinja di bofilwe, meaning that enjoy your stay. And you are free to do anything that you want to do. Thank you very much.
Let me adjust the mic. As you were saying, Masales, that you were struggling with it recently at the golf event. Me and you, I think you are the same height. I do believe that, Dr. Tong, we do have a video which we'll play later on that indicates why we are here. But right now I need to call the representative from the Unisa management, Dr. Matsidi Somolapo. I'll just have a brief bio about you, which indicates that you did your bachelor's BA in biology and sociology in US at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. Also not forgetting your master's and PhD in medical anthropology, specializing in epidemiology and biostatistics at Emory University at Atlanta, Georgia, USA. It shows that you stayed a lot of time in USA, and probably you had one of the best time taken care of. What I want to bring you, the message that I want you to bring for you when you come here is to say that O.R. Tambo and Nelson Mandela in late 1952, they established the first black law firm. So you can really see that we had people that had the interest of this country at heart, to say that as much as we are facing whatever that we are facing, we must also equip ourselves with the legal jargon. And I'm glad that we do have advocates here, because they understand the dynamics very clear in terms of time, as we just indicated now. But also what we have realized is that O.R. Tambo, as the longest president of the African National Congress, made sure that we are doing what is best for those that are in exile. Dr. Molap, the podium is yours. Can we give her the round of applause?
Oh, it's joined. Oh, okay.
Is the issue of height?
It's an issue of height. Thank you very much, Tate Tlhoriso Molefe, for the opportunity. Before I get started, let me first recognize our program directors, because they are the ones introducing us and nobody gets to introduce them. We have Dr. Maureen Tong, who's the Director, Special Projects, Office of the Principal and Vice Chancellor. And then also we have Mr. Xolile Gaba, who's the Digital Learning Advisor in the Gauteng region. And we also have the gentleman who just introduced me, Mr. Tlhoriso Molefe, who's the branch librarian in the Gauteng region, and they all report to Masales in this region. And also, I would like to recognize our sign language interpreters who are with us here. We have Ms. Dimakatso Mutimele, and also we have Ms. Kamogelo Ramoloja, but they didn't mention the name of the gentleman. Ntate, what's your name? Kwena Kamogelo. Oh, they wrote Ms. I'm sorry about that. Mr. Kamogelo. Thank you very much. Sorry to disrupt you. And also, I would like to recognize members of the University Council present here tonight. I can see some of them, and members of the University Executive and Extended Management present. Professor Mfariseni Budeli Namakonde, who is the Executive Dean of the College of Law, and I think from our Executive Management we have Professor Moza Madikani, who's sitting next to Professor Budeli there. And then we also have Ms. Moipone Masales, who's the Unisa Gauteng Regional Director. And then we also have, and I should have started first with our professor, our chancellor, our principal and vice chancellor, Professor Lenkabula, who is the principal and vice chancellor of the university. And also in our midst, we have Ambassador Nomathemba Tambo, a member of Oliver Tambo family and trustee of the Oliver Tambo and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. Welcome, Sis Tembi. And then our eminent keynote speaker, Advocate Leah Kabashe, Senior Counsel, and her family members present with us, and those who are watching virtually. Melia, thank you. I hope they can hear and they are not experiencing any difficulties there. And then we also have other members of the Tambo family who are present this evening. His Excellency Mr. Salih Omar Abdu, Ambassador of the State of Eritrea and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. And also we recognize your excellencies, ambassadors and high commissioners representing various countries in South Africa in attendance tonight. Ms. Natasha Allie, acting CEO of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, esteemed members of the Oliver Tambo family present here and those who are connected virtually, members of the South African government, national, provincial, and local, members of various political parties present with us, Unisa alumni in different countries present here in the venue and virtually, members of the National Student Representative Council and the Regional Student Representative Council, and various student structures present and connected virtually, members from the media houses present and virtually, members of the Unisa epistemic community present and those who are connected virtually, our entertainers who started this evening with nice music as we walked in, El Nino Quartet, distinguished members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen. Dumelang, Kgorong, Sanbonani, Molweni, and good evening. As I have already been introduced, my name is Matshidiso Molapo. I'm the Acting Vice Principal, Strategy, Risk and Advisory Services, and I'm standing here on behalf of our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Lenkabula, who sends her greetings and also her apology for not being with us this evening. As it has been already stated by the program director, together with the Chancellor, President Thabo Mbeki, are officiating the graduation ceremony this evening. Good evening once again, and welcome to this occasion. I'm proudly honored to welcome you to the 4th annual Oliver Reginald Tambo Memorial Lecture, a momentous occasion in the history of the University of South Africa. We are honored and privileged as Unisa to host this lecture as a celebration of his life in collaboration with the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. I'm also delighted, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome the Tambo family and our esteemed partners from the Oliver Tambo and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, represented by Ambassador Nomathemba Tambo and the acting CEO, Ms. Natalie Allie, to this historic occasion. Present amongst us are also members of the diplomatic corps from countries which hosted Mr. Tambo during the years in exile. We acknowledge the High Commission of Zambia for the work they are doing in preserving the O.R. Tambo House in Lusaka, Zambia, and making it available as a museum so that current and future generations will continue to know about the life and participation in the broader African continent. The broader African continent building the oldest liberation movement in Africa. We are grateful that the government of Zambia decided during the occasion of the centenary of Mr. Tambo in 2017 to declare the ANC's safe house in which he spent much of his life in Lusaka when he was not in London as a national monument and opened to the public as the Oliver Tambo Heritage House. We have seen the video about the house played here tonight, or it is going to be played tonight. I take it that it hasn't been played tonight. This evening, we gather here to celebrate, honor, and remember the life and works of a remarkable leader, Dade Oliver Reginald Tambo, under the theme Integrating Constitutionalism and Ethical Leadership to Reclaim Africa's Intellectual Futures. This auspicious occasion, ladies and gentlemen, hosted by the Gauteng region, underscores our unwavering commitment to preserving the cherished values and principles that Dade Oliver Tambo championed throughout his remarkable life. As the University of South Africa, we are proud of our prominent alumnus, Mr. Oliver Reginald Tambo, who completed his law degree at our institution. Can we give that a round of applause to that, ladies and gentlemen? Mr. Oliver Reginald Tambo, who completed his law degree at our institution, he completed his law degree at the institution. Last year, actually, we hosted the third O.R. Tambo Memorial Lecture on his actual birthday on the 27th October 2023. We remain eternally grateful to the Tambo family for that honor. In 2024, we acknowledge we acknowledge what would have been his 107th birthday, to continue to celebrate 170th birthday, to continue to celebrate his enduring dedication to the cause of justice, equality, and the pursuit of freedom, as this serve as an eternal wellspring of inspiration for all of us. The theme of this lecture, Integrating Constitutionalism and Ethical Leadership to Reclaim Africa's Intellectual Futures, is of particular importance to Mr. Tambo's training and practice as a lawyer, as well as to his own personal values. He, together with another prominent ANC alumnus, our former president, Mr. Nelson Mandela, opened the first and for a very long time, the only law firm owned and run by Black people in South Africa. Mr. Tambo loved and valued education, something he had learned from his own father, who ensured that all his brood from 4 wives were literate at a time when education for the Black majority was a very elusive attainment. Before becoming a lawyer, he taught mathematics at St. Peter's for a decade. Program directors, I have no doubt in my mind that had he been born during a different time, he would have made an excellent professor at Unisa, actually, when you think of it. And Mema Lisa, I hope our students are listening. He was multi-talented, hardworking, and continuously evolving his career as his skills were required by his people, and because he was imbued with a very deep sense of duty and service. At this lecture tonight, we have a large contingent of students in attendance, some of whom hold positions of leadership in the National Student Representative Council. I hope they are taking copious notes and making mental notes of what they could learn from the life and times of Mr. Tambo as they contemplate their future and careers, as they will serve their communities and the country. Mr. Tambo moved from teaching in a school to becoming a lawyer, and then moving on to lead the African National Congress as its president for many years, during that time, for a number of years. He became a very astute and skilled negotiator who transformed the ANC into an organization that was ready to move from being a liberation movement and holding its 48th National Conference in 1991 in Durban after having been unburned. He was an agile leader who had the ability to adapt and change his approach as the needs of those he had served changed. He was therefore a servant leader. Mr. Tambo was, together with Mr. Walter Sisulu and Mr. Nelson Mandela, a founding member of the ANC Youth League in 1944, becoming its first national secretary and a member of the National Executive in 1948. The Youth League made several proposals that were aimed at transforming the ANC at the time, thus enabling to adapt to what was required at the time. He was adept and versatile enough as a leader to comfortably navigate the role of being a highly skilled diplomat who represented the ANC to the international community. He also became the commander-in-chief of Umkhonto weSizwe, the arm wing of the ANC. Ladies and gentlemen, many leaders are good at their diplomacy or the military, but not both. Many believe that to be an effective leader, one must have a commanding style of leadership. However, Mr. Tambo was a very gentle and humble person, and certainly not a commanding type of a leader, but firm. Yet his thought leadership, as well as his gentle nature, enabled him to lead the ANC for many years, becoming the longest-serving president of the ANC. During that time, he helped the oldest liberation movement to navigate several stages of transformation. Mr. Tambo's leadership abilities should be a subject of study at Unisa and other institutions. His legacy is a case study that could guide scholars in pursuit of reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures. To our master's and doctoral students who are listening to this or who are participating this evening, I implore you to consider this aspect of Mr. Tambo's legacy as an integral part of your studies and research. Program directors, part of Mr. Tambo's success is attributed to him being an ethical leader. On the occasion of his centenary in 2017, an article by Tami Nteni appeared in the City Press under the title, quote, O.R. Tambo as the epitome and personification of ethical leadership. It stated, I quote, Oliver Tambo was ethical, he had integrity, and his conduct and behavior was the product of deeply ingrained principles and values, unquote. This statement is not far-fetched. Instead, it is corroborated by various accounts that recall the life and times of Mr. Tambo. A devout Anglican throughout his life, he committed himself to ensuring that the system of apartheid was replaced by a just society rooted in the values of democracy, respect for human rights, and dignity for all people, irrespective of their race, class, gender, social, and economic status. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker now for this year's lecture, if I may change gears for a moment, our keynote speaker is Advocate Leah Kabashe, and like Mr. Tambo, is a highly regarded lawyer who both practice law and also spend some time in teaching. I am of the view that she is most suited to speak on the theme of this evening, namely integrating constitutionalism and ethical leadership to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures, because she has studied human rights and constitutional law. Also, amongst many other achievements, she served as a member of the Amnesty Committee of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and as evidence leader of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Both these commissions of inquiry were set up to investigate major lapses of ethics by our political leaders during and after apartheid. This brings to the fore the need to continuously inculcate the values of ethics into our body politic and not assume that those who fought for democratic change from a deeply unethical government may not themselves be found to be seriously lacking in making ethical choices during the democratic era. Sadly, corruption has become deep-rooted into the fabric of our society to such an extent that the Zondo Commission, while it was the most comprehensive inquiry into the lapses in ethics, was certainly not the only one. The Nugent Commission into Tax Administration and Governance at the South African Revenue Service, SARS, concluded that there had been a massive lapses of integrity and governance at the SARS. Yet during the early days of our democratic government, there were encouraging signs that we had as a society made a shift towards respect for good governance and ethics. After all, we count amongst our forefathers and foremothers of our democracy such leaders of the stature in the likes of Mayor Adelaide Tambo and Tate Oliver Tambo. There is hope that our society will emerge from the current quagmire and reclaim the democratic and ethical character. Our system of constitutional democracy has stood the test of time, and it has stood the test of time during this difficult period that we are in. Also, the separation of powers between the legislature, which is parliament, and the executive, which is cabinet, and the judiciary, meaning our courts, have provided the bulwark and protection of our democratic state. Advocate Kabashe, we look forward to your keynote address as you take us through this complex topic today. It is an honor to introduce you to the audience. And program directors, please allow me to give a brief introduction of our guest lecturer this evening. As already noted, she is Advocate Leah Kabashe, and her education background indicate that Mayor Kabashe or Advocate Kabashe obtained her bachelor's degree in administration from the National University of Lesotho in 1978. She obtained her BA Law from the University of Cambridge in the UK in 1983, her LLB degree from the University of Natal in 1987, Master's Honours from the University of Cambridge, UK in 1988, LLM in Human Rights and Constitutional Law from the University of Pretoria in 2005, and she belongs to some professional bodies. She's a member of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates as of 1997. She was conferred the status of Senior Counsel in 2016, and she's a member of Thulamela Chambers and also a member of Advocates for Transformation. Yes, please, let's do it. Thank you. And looking at her background, she was appointed as an acting judge of the High Court in various divisions over a number of years. And she's also a former vice chairperson of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates, 2017-2018, former member of Alternative AFT nominee of the Judicial Services Commission, and also evidence leader of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, and also former senior lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal at the Howard College, and also former member of the Amnesty Committee of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, former head of legal services in the presidency, and former member of the Technical Committee to Theme Committee 5 of the Constitutional Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Unisa Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, I would like to welcome you once again and to this grand evening, and also to welcome our guest lecturer on the stage. I think I have been saying a lot, so it is time, ladies and gentlemen, to invite our guest lecturer. Thank you.
Program directors, Dr. Maureen Tong, Mr. Tlhoriso Colin Molefe, and Mr. Xolile Gaba. Good evening. Greetings to our host, the Vice Chancellor of Unisa, represented this evening by Dr. Matshidiso Mulapo. Thank you, Me, for such a generous introduction. Much as I have done all of those things I said I've done. Huh? Yes, I have. I've got the photos to show. Greetings to Professor Mahashua and Ms. Masalesa Medumela, and all the levels of leadership and scholarship that constitute Unisa. Greetings to the Tambo family in particular. Ambassador, good evening. I'm very pleased that you managed to bring Zach, my other child, along with you. Zach, good to see you again. It's an honor to have you, especially you young people, in our midst. Ms. Natasha Allie, good evening. Good to have you here. And all the members, really, of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation who are either with us this evening or listening in online. Excellencies, members of the 3 branches of government who may be with us or who may be listening online, members of the legal profession, members of civil society and civic organizations, members of the media, all dignitaries here present, students in particular, I'd like to single you out. Good to have you in our midst. Friends and family. I have a number of my family with us and watching us online. Ladies and gentlemen, dumelang, kgotsong. It is indeed a privilege and an honor to be here this evening under the auspices of the 4th Oliver Reginald Tambo Annual Memorial Lecture Series. In 2021, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, set this series of lectures off under the theme, Reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures and accelerating transformations during and in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Justice Chifiwa Maumela of the Northern Gauteng High Court focused in 2022 on the visionary leadership of O.R. Tambo, whilst Minister in the Presidency, Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, reminded this gathering in 2023 of the contributions of global movements by various African intellectuals and scholars at institutions of learning in, amongst others, Timbuktu and the Mali Empire, through to our own South African intellectuals. As I join in their endeavors, allow me to follow an African convention by acknowledging the work of people whose contributions form the backbone of this evening's lecture. And thereafter, allow me then to give a brief overview and go into the substance of this lecture. We all know when you walk into a home, when you walk into a house, we do Medisabat, we greet those who are here, we acknowledge their presence. So the first order of business this evening is to say, I struggled with the appellation I would use to refer to the president of the ANC, Oliver Reginald Tambo. Under Dr. Mavuso Msimang's guidance, and thank you very much, Dr. Mavuso Msimang and Metembi, for gracing us with your presence. But under Dr. Msimang's guidance, I have settled on using Ntate O.R. Tambo, and now and again slipping into just O.R., because it comes so readily. Dr. Msimang assured me that Ntate O.R. was not a man for titles, so please indulge me as I go along, as I've been assured he would have. Second, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. I realize that time does not really permit, but in making introductory remarks, acknowledgements, and disclaimers, allow me to point out that in writing this paper, reliance was placed on a number of sources. I couldn't have put this together without these sources. Literary works on the legacy of O.R. Tambo, contributions of thought leaders such as the justices of our courts and the continent, including material drawn from precedent-setting judgments. I must mention that there's Justice Dingake. He's actually a judge in Papua New Guinea, he's in the Seychelles and Sierra Leone, Kimutswana, who has been deployed by the UN to these various fora. I had breakfast with him and said to him, I'm giving a lecture, and he kindly gave me tips and asked me to speak to the organizers and say, he wouldn't mind coming here and giving a lecture. He's very learned. He wouldn't mind coming across and sharing his thoughts with you. So I throw that at you. He's a lovely person, and as I say, well read. I have also relied on the works of writers from the Black consciousness era, including those located in the diaspora. I have had dialogues with the millennial generation, including my son over here, who has tried to bring me into the world of AI. And of course, I have looked at the writings of intellectuals who are far more familiar with this terrain than I am. I have in particular sought out the writings of the former Vice Chancellor and Principal of this august institution, Professor Bani Pijana, who is a human rights lawyer, a man who has devoted his time to promoting a deeper understanding of ethical, moral, principled, honorable standards of behavior, ranging from the relevance of the principle of Ubuntu as an organizing principle of African morality to the role of racism in perverting these standards of innate human behavior. He has spoken much about Ubuntu Betu. Likewise, I have relied on the thought leadership that is expressed in the concept of an African Renaissance, and gained insights on this from a cohort of like-minded African leaders who, alongside President Thabo Mbeki, called for and promoted the rebirth of our continent. I have consulted, of course, Dr. Msimang over there, who worked closely with O.R. Tambo and who kindly shared his insights with me. In particular, the ethical standards that O.R. held. It would be remiss of me to forget to say that the courage to accept this invitation was also drawn from the Johannesburg Festival of Women Writers. I hope you've heard about them. Talk to me about them after this. This is an intergenerational conversation that I attended in March at the University of Johannesburg. It is the brainchild of one of our own thought leaders, Ambassador Barbara Masekela. For me, it was an absolute eye-opener on how many young intellectuals and creatives are writing and publishing works on our social condition and societal expectations, what their challenges as millennials are, and in essence, discussing our intellectual futures. The festival was a critical reminder that an inquiring mind, coupled with industry and a healthy dose of self-reliance in recording our own life experiences, builds self-confidence. These millennials are reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures. And from an intellectual futures perspective, they really should be paired with other disciplines, including researchers, academics, lawyers, etc., in lifting the level of discourse to answering the question, where to from here? Now to a brief overview. We have understood that the overarching theme is about reclaiming our intellectual futures, but the sub-theme really is about constitutionalism and ethical leadership. Though I focus mainly on developments in South Africa, I intend to demonstrate that we as Africans of this continent and the diaspora, and I say this, the diaspora is well represented in our country, and thank goodness for that, because we interact at different levels. We are making our mark. There's a book that I came across that's entitled, We Were Always Here. And I found the topic fascinating because it's a book that talks about what we have written about ourselves, what we have invented as Black people. It's a book I recommend to everybody. It's available at exclusives, if I might say that. I really found it a useful read. Tonight's theme, of course, is really about what founds, what grounds constitutional government and ethical leadership. A useful definition we can run with for current purposes of what constitutional government is the following, and I quote, "Constitutional government is government premised on a guarantee of rights, the separation of powers, strong institutions that provide oversight, an independent and impartial judiciary, and an executive that is responsive to the needs of its people," close quotes. I then looked at the Oxford Dictionary and found a definition for ethical conduct. It defines ethical conduct as conduct that is, and I quote, "connected with the beliefs and principles about what is right and what is wrong, and really about morally correct and acceptable behavior." The contextual setting of this lecture, of course, is Ntate O.R.'s legacy of ethical leadership, matched with a drive to see effective democratic institutions in place in South Africa. You can't separate the two when you talk about Ntate O.R. Yes, indeed, he wanted us to be upright people, but his basic aim was to make sure that democracy takes root in this country. I will be looking at cases from our own constitutional court judges largely that take this vision of O.R. Tambo forward. In an attempt at answering these questions that I ask about how we take the intersection of law and morality forward, how we integrate constitutionalism and ethical leadership, I look at the judgments in the certification judgment, that's the one that certified our Constitution, the Makwanyana judgment, that's the one that got rid of the death penalty and said dignity, dignity, dignity is everything. Something we seem to have forgotten in this country. Dignity is everything. I look at the Glenister II judgment, which talks to accountability in high office, and I then also look at the EFF judgment, we all know it as the Nkandla judgment, which again talks to accountability at high levels of government. I look at the Shilubana judgment, which dealt with traditional leadership and allowing women to come into their own within the traditional space. And of course, I've also looked at the Women's Legal Centered Trust matter. It's about women married in terms of Sharia law and their rights under Sharia law, just aligning that with our Constitution. What I've done, I don't know if Unisa is going to be making the paper available, is I've got Annexure A, B, and C to my paper, which then sets out what the cases say in context. The first two judgments embed our constitutionalism, and most importantly, the significance of a participatory certification process. So what we did at the time was we assembled as the Constitutional Assembly. If you recall, those of you will recall, I was fortunate enough to be put into a committee of the Constitutional Assembly which dealt with the courts. But the point about that judgment is it made sure that South Africans drafted, created a constitution that would work for them. So when people tell you that we've brought this and that, we have laws that don't really work for us, the responsibility is ours because we drafted this constitution. If there's anything we want to change, it is our responsibility to make those changes. I have said the Makwanyana judgment, dignity, life. Glenister, Nkandla, Shilubana, I have touched on those. Our constitutionalism has evolved from an authoritarian style of government under apartheid to an evolving constitutional dispensation that has in 2024 led South Africa to the current constitutionalism of political compromise that the government of national unity represents. The critics of this model bemoan the paucity of African intellectual input into the current constitutional order. I beg to differ. But that topic is a self-standing topic on its own. What I will say this evening is that the thought leadership of our jurists has greatly influenced the development of our constitutional dispensation, even where their decisions were at odds with the views of the executive and the legislature, as evidenced in the Nkandla judgment. I believe that we have underestimated the impact of the judiciary's thought leadership in shaping our constitutionalism by infusing indigenous law, values, knowledge systems into our evolving constitutionalism. The impact of the jurisprudence that is emerging from our courts is indeed an integral part of reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures. There remains room for further growth on this front, of course, but as I submit this evening, those developments will occur organically. And I encourage more young scholars, African scholars, and jurists to combine their efforts with those of thought leaders from other disciplines to influence the trajectory of our constitutional dispensation. Key to these developments will be lessons drawn from the rest of the continent. We really must persist in our efforts at finding ways of interpreting our Constitution in ways and respects that continue to give it legitimacy and moral authority, using avenues that enable it to remain true to its preamble and constantly acknowledging its values and the rule of law. We must pursue this intentionally through memorial lectures such as this, in supporting research in the field, and in expanding on published works of note such as, and this particular one I quote, The Road to Democracy, South Africans Telling Their Own Stories. Where practical, we must harness developments in AI to broaden our capacity to research and compare fact-based propositions. That's the green shoots part of my overview. However, those reflections don't answer the following questions which speak to the culture of rights and obligations and of Ubuntu and accountability, values that our constitutionalism is predicated on. Why were 18 people gunned down not so long ago in Lusikisiki? 15 of these were women. Next question, why are we such a violent society? What are society's obligations in assisting the state to give effect to Section 12 of the Constitution? Section 12 speaks to freedom of security and security of the person. Next question, what are our plans to alleviate poverty by creating jobs or to ensure that no child goes to school and spends the entire day at that school hungry? What are we doing to stem endemic corruption, malfeasance, unethical conduct, or at the very least, what are we doing to protect whistleblowers? These are constitutional rights worthy of our attention in the interest of maintaining a stable democracy, a democracy that promotes the well-being of its people, and one that supports the quest to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures. Instability and a preoccupation with accumulating and controlling resources constrains one's ability to think, to research freely, and to share information across borders. An environment in which violence and vengeance determine the realization of rights and obligations is inimical to the reclamation of Africa's intellectual futures, or to social conditions where scholarship, creativity, and innovation thrive. From the perspective of ethical leadership, we must reflect on the following questions. What has happened to ethical leadership within our families, the foundation of society? I want to pause here and say, I was appointed as an acting judge in the Durban High Court a number of years back. The young man who was accused had been accused of murder. His mother, somebody had identified her, sat right at the back of court. This young man says to the court, my mother is going to give this court evidence to show, or she's going to tell this court, that I was at home with her on the night that they say this particular murder occurred. As soon as he said that, Mom got up. I could see her because I was watching. You sit this side, Hager. Mom got up, walked out of court. That matter ran for another 3 weeks. Mom never came back to court. That's ethical leadership that starts in the family, huh? Mom said, Ngeke. I will not do it, because she knew the young man was not at home the night that this particular murder was, when it happened. But I go on to ask the question, what is it that breeds and feeds the contempt we have for human life? I mean, this is really where we are sitting right now. Why are some sectors of society calling for the return of the death penalty when we well understand the fundamental value of having Section 10, that's the right to dignity, and Section 11, the right to life, as non-derogatory provisions in our Constitution. But you hear people, you've heard them, they want to have the death penalty reintroduced. Many of us are leaders of one variety or another, whether in our homes, in our church communities, in our places of employment, in fact, wherever we interact with others. By the same token, many believe that South Africa has a world-class constitution. Despite this, our balancing of constitutional rights and obligations appears to be skewed against us being our sister and brother's keeper, against us being leaders who believe in our own humaneness, who believe in Ubuntu. Is the problem maybe that law no longer reflects the moral standards of society? And I know moral standards change, but this is a question we should ask ourselves. Does the law no longer reflect the moral standards that we believe in? Is there a necessary nexus between having a common understanding of morality and the quest to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures? To this end, do we redefine or reinforce or simply teach the value of ethical conduct and the necessity for ethical leadership at our institutions of learning? What might inform this debate are 3 extracts from an article I found on the internet. Trust me, it's okay. Which I believe resonate with many of the findings of the Zondo Commission. So the first question, I take these out of context, but they are relevant questions. The first is, there is a common complaint that powerful people get a break in the enforcement of the criminal laws that exist. The sense that the law is merely political weakens people's feelings that it makes a moral claim on them. Are these the kinds of thoughts we have, that powerful people get away with murder? The second extract, here's somebody just thinking, if only I were powerful enough, I could get away with this. Is this what preoccupies us? The third and last reflection reads as follows. When good people are regularly seen to break the law loses its moral force. And when the law loses its moral force, when good people lie, that's it, it erodes morality. These are things we really must reflect on and discuss in the communities that we interact in. In the context of these questions, I ask, what moral foundation are we bequeathing to the next generation as they interpret and develop legislation, the common law, customary law? Will that foundation assist them in reclaiming our intellectual futures? What conduct do we need to change in the redistribution of available resources? Everything is about resources. What is it that we have to change to make sure there is a more even-handed redistribution of? What conduct do we need to change? How do we integrate the servant leadership, the selfless nature of things about resources? What is it that we have to change to make sure there is a more even-handed redistribution of resources? How do we integrate the servant leadership, the selfless nature of O.R. Tambo into the fabric of society? These questions and propositions I explore in memory of Ndate O.R. Tambo, the freedom fighter, the human rights lawyer, a true Democrat, an ethical leader of note. I therefore turn to reflecting very briefly on what I have come to understood of the legacy of Ndate O.R. Many of us, of course, stand in absolute awe of Ndate O.R. Tambo and consider him to be one of the founding fathers of our Constitution. It is therefore proper to focus this lecture on constitutionalism, and ethical leadership by recognizing his insightful contribution to the end product, to what followed on the release of President Nelson Mandela and other political leaders in 1990. Acknowledging the footprints of our forefathers is what makes us Africans with a culture, with a heritage, with an ancestry that informs our current worldviews. And I say this very deliberately, especially to young people. Africans with a culture. That culture is what makes us think. But that culture is part of a multicultural society. So broaden your thinking. Understand and learn as you go along. From the perspective of moral and ethical ideals, I make common cause with the views of Steve Biko. You know, I just picked up that book of his, I Write What I Like. And in that, he gives various lectures. This particular one I sourced this material from is entitled Some African Cultural Concepts. He wrote, and I quote, this is important, "One of the fundamental aspects of our culture is the importance we attach to man, to woman, man in those days. Ours has always been a man-centered society. Westerners have in many occasions been surprised at the capacity we have for talking to each other, not for the sake of arriving at a particular conclusion, but merely to enjoy communication for its own sake." That's who we are. He concludes by stating, "The great powers of the world may have done wonders in giving the world an industrial and military look, but the great gift still has to come from Africa, giving the world a more human face." A more human face. To me, that speaks of inclusiveness, identity, consciousness in the sense of communal ideals, objectives, and approaches to determining the public welfare. As an aside, I ask, have we failed Steve Biko? Have we failed O.R. Tambo in this regard? In what I have heard about O.R. Tambo and read about him, he, like Steve Biko, sought to give the world a more human face. He practiced Ubuntu. He was a servant leader of principle. He upheld the highest standards of ethical conduct as a person and as a leader, as evidenced by his humaneness, his humility, his brilliance, his strategic prowess, his foresight, his meticulousness and attention to detail, his faith, his service to the people of South Africa and by extension to the people of our continent. He made it clear to his comrades that, and I quote from what Dr. Mavuso Msimang said to me, he said, "The purpose of the struggle was to overthrow and replace the apartheid government with a democratic and ethical form of government," close quotes. He also believed, interestingly enough, that every revolution had to be linked to a name, to a leader, and for him, Nelson Mandela was that name. Nelson Mandela was that human face of liberation. And he, O.R. Tambo, proposed Nelson Mandela as that human face of our liberation. Look what just that humility and passing the baton on has done for us. Are we able, do we fit at all into O.R. Tambo's shoes? I ask myself this, or really, at that level of leadership, would I take the spotlight and shine it on somebody else because I understand the benefit, the value that's going to come from that particular personality running with the baton? Liberation in its widest terms includes the realization of rights and obligations, including substantive literacy and a renewal of learning and culture, economic emancipation, the eradication of poverty in all its forms, the abolition of the system of racism that apartheid was premised on, and we still fight these racist battles today. I fight them all the time. And a rebirth of a human consciousness that is inclusive of all races, all beliefs, all religions, amongst others. For O.R. Tambo, a democratic South Africa would put people first, Batho pele, which is a call that later became the mantra of the public service under President Thabo Mbeki. I was fortunate enough to spend a bit of time in the presidency, 18 months, as Chief Director of Legal Services. So I was introduced to and made to understand and imbibe that culture of the people first, Batho pele, because I worked in the highest office of this land. And that office set the tone, set examples that we had to comply with. And we did, and it was a pleasure to do it. In expressing his views on a constitutional democracy for South Africa, Ndate O.R. insisted that there had to be a Bill of Rights. He was also adamant that women had a critical role to play in the liberation of our country, and in particular, in challenging practices that were the very converse of a free and equal society. O.R.'s views are aligned to those expressed in, by way of example, the Freedom Charter, we know that, and as I have read, the code of conduct that he commissioned for the ANC while in exile. They also find expression in the preamble to our Constitution. And I hesitate to read it. I just find that it is such a grounding preamble, but let me take the time and read it. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. This is what we signed up for. I continue. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to, 1, heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. We also signed up to the following. We wanted to lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. We said we want to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. And finally, we said we wanted to build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. It ends with, may God protect our people. I think of O.R. Tambo and faith. He was a prayer warrior. He was a prayerful man. May God protect our people. Nkosi sikelele i-Afrika. Morena boloka setjhaba sa heso. God seën Africa. God bless Africa. Mudzimu fatutsetsa Afrika. Hosi katekisa Africa. That's what we signed up for. And I think we've lost sight, because we don't carry that Constitution around with us. We've lost sight of what our parents, what our grandparents signed up for. This preamble embodies the values of O.R. Tambo and the public participatory and consultative approach that he championed. In the result, and from the processes applied by the Constitutional Court, we got the certification of our Constitution. We know that our Constitution, therefore, was drafted by us, the people of South Africa, represented in a constitutional assembly. The end product evidence our intentional infusion of the principles of Ubuntu, coupled with universal values which speak to the supremacy of the Constitution and the rule of law. It was ratified by our Constitutional Court, thereby giving legal legitimacy to our Constitution. This building block of constitutionalism and the rule of law was part of the guidance given by O.R. Tambo while in exile and even as his health was failing, as illustrated by his instruction to his comrades that input into the drafting of the Constitution had to be sourced from as wide a variety of lawyers and members of civil society as possible. And I say, I was one of those lawyers. I was very young then, you can imagine, 1994, but we were part of NADEL, and Pius Langa, as our president, gathered many of us who were already in practice and said, we are going to sit down in workshops and talk about what we want to see in our Constitution. All of this driven by O.R. Tambo's thinking. A man who gave his life for his people, a man who believed in rigorous intellectual scholarship. Speaking to the point on ethical leadership, OR's humane approach to dealing with human relations is a valuable working model when interrogating the intersection of law and morality, which underpins ethical conduct. Stories are told about how he would resolve disputes that arose in the ANC, always believing in the dignity that accrued to every human being. In return, those who worked with him adopted his ethical standards, his work ethic, and ensured that in the work they did, they never disappointed O.R. Tambo. Bani Pichana posits the following on ethics and ethical behavior. He says, human beings are by their nature moral creatures, and as such we are bound to live by certain rules and norms which make our lives together fulfilling. He continues to say that moral judgments, and I quote, derive their force or authority because they have been received and appropriated by the community into its moral universe, into its sense of right and wrong, good and evil, is and ought. I've also looked at an article by Professor Lisiba Tifo, who writes that it is generally accepted that ethics is a general pattern or way of life. It's a set of rules or conduct that says we must have a particular moral code. It is an inquiry about the rules of conduct or way of life. He also interestingly defines and says the stem word for ethics is the Greek word ethos, meaning character. And that resonated with me. Ethics, character. What is my character? While the word morality has Latin origins, moralis meaning customs or manners. Ubuntu speaks to character, therefore, to customs and manners, to ethical conduct, to values that promote, and I quote, social responsibility and solidarity, the duty of care, the virtues of sensitivity, selflessness, and devotion to duty, as well as the vision of a society founded on justice and equality. The African Charter on Human Rights, Human and People's Rights, provides for every individual to freely take part in the cultural life of his community. And I quote, to the promotion and protection of morals and traditional values recognized by the community. The dicta of the late Justice Yvonne Mokgoro in the Makwanyane judgment emphasizes that the value of Ubuntu, and I quote her, has been viewed as its basis for a morality of cooperation, compassion, communalism, concern for the interests of the collective, respect for the dignity of personhood, with emphasis on virtues of that dignity in social relationships and practices. She's correct. Why we are where we are with gender-based violence, goodness alone knows. Because here are guiding dicta from our courts. Here are guiding writings from our intellectuals on how we should be conducting ourselves. Ethical standards complement and give form to a rights culture. And that is particularly important. Given the challenges to the conduct of public office bearers at different levels of government, and taking into consideration the findings and recommendations emanating from the Zondo Commission, do we meet the leadership standards that O.R. Tambo would have expected of us? He would expect us to interrogate constitutionalism, to integrate, I beg your pardon, constitutionalism with ethical leadership by paying close attention to selecting the type of leader our public institutions require to progress the democratic project. Further still, that leader would be someone that we would be proud to emulate, a leader whom we would hesitate to disappoint. Are we on course? The Constitution is our guide. And in particular, the oaths of office taken by public office bearers and functionaries set out the constitutional expectation. Excuse me. I want to commend my paper to you and jump to my conclusions because we've been here a while. But the conclusions really illustrate what we have been talking about: constitutionalism, ethical leadership, morality. Our role in forming these building blocks within our families, let's start there, and then cascading upwards into different levels of government. But the conclusion really that I have reached is that there is no passion for or national vision that underpins our brand of constitutionalism. We are also not coordinating our efforts as a continent on reclaiming our intellectual futures. There are fundamentally different views in our society on what is moral, what conduct is acceptable, what conduct does and does not promote the interests of the collective. We should find a broad consensus on this subject matter. Or as one musician, I was listening to her on TV the other morning, Msaki, I actually wrote this down. Never heard of Msaki before. I'm sure the young people know Msaki. But this is what she said, and this is why I took this, because I wanted to direct it in particular at young people. She said, we need grassroots introspection on who we want to be. We need grassroots. Kiluna, go grassroots. You young people, we need grassroots. But grassroots as you are the energy that's going to get all of us behind understanding who we want to be, whilst holding those in leadership accountable for their actions. So she doesn't let leadership get away. She says, hold them accountable, but for goodness sake, let's sit down and understand who we, as the people of this country, as the people of this continent, want to be. Corruption is one of the key areas where the integration of constitutionalism and ethical leadership can make a difference. The legislative framework is there. However, unlike some other countries on our continent, we don't have an anti-corruption agency. Chief Justice Zondo has recommended that one be established to address the prevalence of corruption. He has also recommended that a national charter against corruption be established, incorporating a standardized code of conduct that would be adopted, and I quote, by government the business sector and relevant stakeholders. And we fall into that bracket of relevant stakeholders. This is our country. Government must establish, in my view, a unit that assists whistleblowers in every single department in the country. And they can do that because it's aligned to Section 85C of the Constitution, which says government departments must align and cooperate and coordinate their activities. So imagine if we had an anti-corruption unit in every single government department, and they met in the same way as the security cluster meets and whoever meets, they met to say, this is what's going on, this is how we can strengthen our democracy. That would make such a difference to giving a level of comfort to whistleblowers. In essence, what I'm saying is visible enforcement at all levels of government and within the corporate environment, in line with our constitutional values and provisions, can be the mechanism that gives us confidence and moral authority to take the reclamation of our intellectual futures into the next 150 years. The only way to achieve this is by engendering a safe, stable, and peaceful democratic order where we communicate amongst ourselves as opposed to being antagonists fighting for resources. The people must give birth to and then own and nurture initiatives that will create growth and stability. They must own the problem and the solutions and build a national consensus on which to move forward. A starting point might be that the populace would agree to, and this is me pontificating, a fixed term of, say, 3 years, where we have a moratorium or an internal détente, in particular on areas of conflict relative to the foundational principles of the Constitution. So here I'm really talking about contested terrain. Hey, I listen to these parliamentary debates. Oh, can we have a 3-year term where we are trying to find one another? The one tried and tested way in which we can do this is by supporting the making of submissions to the national dialogue that has been talked about. If we were able to organize our representation into a forum similar to that national dialogue or something similar to the Constitutional Assembly where we started, if our Constitutional Court was able to certify the outcomes of those discussions, those decisions, and convert them into some legal document that binds each and every one of us, this, in my view, would be a starting point. O.R. Tambo believed in the selection of an individual to champion a cause identified by the populace. We could use his formula to select and then rally around 1 or 2 public figures who have high moral standing and who could lead discussions on the agreed agenda. African presidents on the continent have spent resources on us. Their people were exposed to the retaliatory strikes of the apartheid government. Yet they rallied behind South Africa attaining its freedom. Let's work as a continent to put an end to violence and corruption and to instill ethical governance in our constitutional frameworks. Let us recommit to putting Batubili, people first, and mean it. O.R. Tambo believed in placing women at the forefront of the struggle. Many women would be prepared to lead the charge if the cause was just and the support given to it sincere. Sincerity is very important, good people. Don't just say and you're not doing. Be sincere once you have taken a decision. We must acknowledge the initiatives that the South African police are taking in dealing with violence. As our contribution to this front of struggle, we should at the very least reinvigorate the teaching and learning of ethical standards, whether it's at home or in our institutions of learning. Next, poverty. Poverty on our continent is endemic. Unemployment levels are unjustifiable. All these issues touch on our human rights, our dignity, Ubuntu, our constitutionalism. If we agreed that intellectual futures includes exploring bringing AI into our conversations and dreams for our continent, then our unemployed youth are the ones who should be engaged in reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures. They are tech savvy. They can and will develop the legal pluralism that defines our brand of constitutionalism and take the discourse on inclusivity, ethics, identity, and relevance to the next level of discourse. Education is key to progression. I submit that the Constitution, the Makwanyane judgment, the Shilubane judgment, the Nkandla judgment, the Women's Legal-Centered Trust judgment, amongst others, the oaths of office taken by public office bearers, and the codes of conduct regulating the conduct of public officials as source materials that should be part of the life orientation curriculum of learners. I have always said to my children, LO, what is it that you study in LO? Here we go. We should infuse these intellectual subjects that are practical and pragmatic into that. I pointed at them because they were in the same school, into this L, and they passed LO. But you see how many children would know something about LO. It was the easiest subject for them to pass. How many of our children, if we taught ethics and constitutionalism, would end up with first grade passes because they understood relationships, dignity, communalism. We should harness that intellectual energy that our young minds have. They dream big. They can assist us in reclaiming our intellectual futures. In our quest to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures, our generation has a duty to continue contributing to the ongoing discourse on political, liberal, and African constitutionalism, and the role of ethical leadership in supporting the principles underpinning a constitutional state led by ethical leaders. Those efforts are an ongoing quest to be true to what I believe are the universal values recorded in Section 1 of our Constitution, as these values intersect with an evolving democracy that seeks to infuse African indigenous law and the trends that are emerging from the continent. All of these should be knitted into the fabric of our continental DNA. In closing, going back to my little book, we were always here. We have been productive. We must continue to publish our scholarship, share the good news of how smart we are, how resourceful we can be, how inclusive we have become. Unisa has regular conversations and colloquiums. We should attend more of these, host intergenerational conversations, and determine our intellectual futures into the next 150 years. The scholarship that Unisa and the Thabo Mbeki School of Governance inspire must be supported. Back to the young ones, our future generations. In these lectures, in these memorial lectures, we discuss the reclamation of Africa's intellectual futures so as to encourage future generations to write, to compose, to create, to sing, to dance, to invent, to innovate, to pray about our intellectual futures, so as to give them hope, to tell them that there is something to live for, despite the ups and downs of existence. They must be encouraged to extend their reach amongst South Africans and create synergies with Africans on the continent, and through their intellectual ingenuity, they must impact the globe, giving it a more human face. So that is my challenge. We should keep working at a more inclusive society, but really, young people, next generation, don't leave us behind, drag us along, but you have the intellectual capacity and the energy. You are tech savvy. Take us into the next 150 years. I thank you.
Tambo House, located in the Oliver Tambo House, located in Avondale, formerly Charleston Green, in Lusaka, Zambia, is a special house that holds a rich history. Once a safe house for renowned ANC leader Oliver Reginald Tambo, Oliver Tambo spearheaded the fight against apartheid in and outside of South Africa. Let us delve into the fascinating story of this heritage site and uncover the significance of Zambia's support for the liberation movement in Southern Africa. This safe house is strategically designed as a two-story building to confuse the enemy while under attack. The staircase leading to the second floor is not visible from the entrance as it is placed behind the house on the right side, leading to a secret back gate. The house was guarded by the armed wing of the ANC known as Umkhonto weSizwe. In 1989, while in Lusaka, Oliver Tambo suffered a stroke. President Kenneth Kaunda authorized the use of his presidential jet to fly Oliver Tambo to Sweden for specialized treatment, after the US and the UK refused to take him in as the ANC was branded as a terrorist organization. Former South African President Jacob Zuma commended Dr. Kaunda and the Zambians for hosting Mr. Oliver Tambo and the ANC headquarters for 22 years. The house is open to the general public at a minimal charge fee. If you are a South African or a Zambian, find time to visit this house.
Thank you very much. Now, I think that was a video on our Tambo. I will put it as our advocate was saying here. Thank you for the video. Advocate, we really appreciate your lecture tonight. There's a lot that was said tonight, but I think I pointed out of that what you said when you gave us the scenario of a case matter where a person was coming to court and had an issue there. So he actually said that his mother is going to say to the court that he indeed didn't do any murder. So your question there was, what happened to ethical leadership in our families? So that's a clear indication to us that around that, there are people who really are ethical, who would not stand for their children, even for anybody in their families, if it is that they have done wrong. But I've also looked at how you are putting the embodiment of OR through the three aspects that you were speaking to. And you were speaking to the Code of Conduct, the Freedom Charter, and the preamble of our government, which gives us an idea that his thoughts that he had about a country had been embodied there. And clearly, through his ethical leadership, we can see that he wants to put people first, or he was putting people first, and the work of ethics in his work. We thank you very much, Advocate. I'm going to use a Okay, let me take the opportunity to now introduce our respondent, who is going to be Ambassador Nomatemba Tambo, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the NGPO Tambo Consultancy. In her professional life, she is involved in DERCO, where she does she's the South African High Commissioner to the Court of St. James in Northern Ireland, UK. She's also in the South African Ambassador to Italy, permanent representative to the Rome-based United Nations agencies, non-residential ambassador to Malta, Albania, and Marino, South African Consul General to Hong Kong and Macau. She is the CEO of Evening Stars Manufacturing, a contributing editor to Fair Lady magazine, co-producer and presenter of the Just Desserts TV magazine program, co-founder of the Women in Capital Growth, Women in Government Company, the director of WetNet Solutions, and a non-executive director for the Resilient Income Property Fund. She obtained her education through the University of Roehampton Institute in the UK, where she completed a BA Honours in History and English. Then at the University of Witwatersrand, she got her LLB in postgraduate law. She did her diplomatic training diploma through DERCO, and she is also a member of various trustees, a board member in various other boards and organizations. She is a trustee of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to allow our ambassador to come and do her respondent speech.
Well, good evening, everyone, and you'll hear me talk for literally 30 more seconds. So after that wonderful introduction, and I thank you very much for it, I'm actually not going to speak at all. I'm going to hand the baton over to Zachary, who is my youngest child, and I thought it might be more interesting to listen to what he has to say in terms of his generation and where they see his grandfather having relevance and importance in their lives. So Zachary, who is a chief marketing officer for a company called FCB, I still don't know what they do, but apparently he's very, very good at it. So Zachary is going to come up and speak.
So good evening, everyone. Evidently, I am not Ambassador Nomatemba Tambo, so thank you, Mummy, for the introduction. Just by way of quick housekeeping, forgive me in advance for not observing protocol. I think we know everyone that is here, and on behalf of the family, I thank those of you that are here. I thank you for attending and honoring the legacy of my grandfather. But in particular, I would like to thank Unisa for creating a platform where conversations like this can be held, a platform where we can stop and think back on not just our history, but how that has brought us to where we are and where we move from there. So thank you very much for that. Now, according to this program, it's meant to be a respondent statement, but I know when I'm out of my depth because Auntie Leah, you are a speaker par excellence. And I want to thank you not just for the words that you gave, the lecture that you presented, but the way in which you did so, in a manner that allows us to introspect and to really take stock as to where we are as a country and what our individual roles need to be and the way in which we need to consider how we move forward. Now, what would I say about my grandfather, given the content of today's theme? As a heads up, my mother told me about a good 30 minutes ago, I'd prefer if you speak instead of me. So it may not be as robust as some of the other speakers here today. It's been established that OR was a man whose intellectual rigor and unwavering selflessness was a driving force into the decisions that he made and how he fought to advance the country forward. But I think that when we look at the topic of intellectualism, where I believe my grandfather truly shined was understanding the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And that was really touched on when Auntie Leah spoke to removing himself as the face of the liberation and putting Madiba there, understanding the implications and the benefits it would have for society at large. And to that end, it was not just because of moral clarity, it was because of a view and a consistent approach to self-sacrifice. When we look at South Africa as it is today, when we look at the challenges we face, the obstacles we have to overcome, there is often this metaphorical game of hot potato that we play, where what is government doing? What is business doing? What is my neighbor doing? But really, we need to bring ourselves back and ask ourselves, what are we doing? We are in an environment and in society that has a long way to go, but that has come a long way since my grandfather's passing. And what roles can each of us as individuals play in being able to espouse these morals, these ethics, these characteristics that we've heard about today? Now, there are many ways in which we can play a role. And no one is saying we must go to the extremes that my grandfather went to. No one is saying that we must quite literally work ourselves to death in order to effect change. But what we need to do is make sure that we apply our best selves in unifying those around us towards a common cause. On my grandfather's tombstone, it says he dreams of a world where there are neither blacks nor whites, just South Africans united in diversity. Or as me and the millennials in the room would say, hashtag just RSA, no DNA. But ultimately, in bringing ourselves together, intellectualism and ethical leadership is about understanding that as we move forward, it is not to be used as a weapon, but as a tool to build bridges. Bridges that empower those that are disempowered. Bridges that help uplift those that have been disenfranchised. To quote my grandfather, he once said that the haves cannot continue to exist at the expense of the have-nots. And we see that today, unfortunately, that is still a reality that we as a society are faced with. But nonetheless, we must continue to push forward. We can continue to push forward simply because we stand on the shoulders of giants. O.R. Tambo, Sisulu, Mandela, to name but a few. But the question and the provocation I want to give everyone here today is, what is the benefit of standing on the shoulders of giants if our heads are still under the water? And to that end, are we standing up straight? So as we go into the weekend, I would challenge us all to espouse the characteristics that we've spoken to today. Because for all the things that my grandfather was, the grim reality is, whilst he may be with us in spirit, he is not with us anymore in physical presence. So the baton has been passed to us to be able to be the next generation of leaders, to be able to be the next generation that can stand with purpose, and when those that follow us are on our shoulders, they breathe deeply and they see nothing but opportunity. I thank you.
Wow. As a mother, I'm like, wow, wow, wow. Let's give her a round of applause. Absolutely, absolutely. For me, that speaks to the confidence, that speaks to the mentorship, that speaks to affirmation. As a mother to say, I know you'll do it, and go ahead and do it. And did he deliver? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Here we are. We're at the Q&A section of our program. we've had a very detailed and really comprehensive lecture by Advocate Kabashe. And of course, I personally had the privilege of having read it for more than a week and having gone through it. And we have had, the salient points that she raises. I will not re-summarize what she said. She said it well enough. But I would love to give you the opportunity as the audience. Perhaps you do have a question for her, or perhaps you have a question for the younger reincarnation of O.R. Tambo. So, let's see people in the room that are going to assist her to pass through the mic. The mic is moving across the house. Let's hear questions for either of them. Ladies and gentlemen, may you indulge me and allow us to make this period much shorter because we are well into the later part of the evening. The program said we will do Q&A for 30 minutes. Would we do it 20 minutes? Is it okay? Or less? Can I therefore, or less, see the total number of hands of people that have a question? And if these hands are not raised now, we're not going to give another round of questions. Ladies and gentlemen, my eyes tell me there are 3 hands. Opportunity going, gone. We'll have only 3 questions, ladies and gentlemen. Was there another one? Oh, forgive me, I was focused. Only 4. We shall not take any further. We're going to take all of them at once, and then we'll give both our keynote and respondent an opportunity to respond to them. May we start with the white shirt? Oh, where? Here. Okay, you have the mic. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And may I request that you start by telling us your name and you are speaking in which capacity?
Okay. My name is Sipo Esihle Kumede, and I am a lecturer in the Department of History here at Unisa. I think I want to thank the advocate for such a stellar lecture. You touched on a lot of important stuff that I think we still have to go back and work on as a nation. My question is just one. How do we approach the aspect of justice, especially in addressing historical atrocities in the effort towards peace and reconciliation? And I'm asking this question because there is a vacuum, and I think in answering your question when you ask why are we a violent society, there are various cases that we have not addressed, and this vacuum, and I think we need to go back and address those cases, and in the effort, of course, towards rebuilding and restructuring. So what is justice and how do we address that in relation to the past?
Thank you so much. Really clear and articulate. Thank you. Let's take the next question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Ngati. I too also come from the history department. I did my master's dissertation on the life of Chief Albert Luthuli, Nkosi Chief Albert Luthuli, and he also spoke about ethical leadership. And I'm provoked by the advocate's provocation to the younger people around the face of who we want to reflect us or reflect the next generation. And I think where we as young people have a problem is that the older generation are so flawed in terms of like the corruption cases, like it's in society, it's in our face. There is that whole demoralization of like, then if you guys aren't perfect, then who are we supposed to pick next? So it has that whole, we're now less motivated, right? So then it's now throwing back the question to the older generation, who will you reinvigorate and place at saying, this is who we'd like you guys to emulate so that we also can find like-minded in our generation, say, let's put this face for our next generation. So it's that also a dichotomy of like, we're seeing what's happening currently now in life. So now we're like, okay, so there's no one who's morally or ethically sound. So then what's the point of us being morally and ethically sound. So I think that's also where the provocation is like responding to. So thank you for the lecture. Thank you.
Just differ with you in one respect. I don't believe there are no morally, ethically sound people in our society. There are several, and perhaps some of them are choosing to look away and not say anything. But our society does have a moral base. But you are quite correct in your question that asks, from the examples we've seen, and because there are so many, who do we look to as younger people? Yeah? There was another question this side. There, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, Advocate, I wish to thank you. My name, I have a very long name. I'm Puleng Munyakani. My title, Professor, Dr. Advocate. And I have been brought up in exile. I'm also from the University of Lesotho, just like Council. She touched on a very touching aspect, the aspect of inequality. While, all in all, her lecture covers a lot of issues, she comes across as a word of encouragement in the middle of something which I believe it's a sort of a disarray, because I don't picture a situation where I speak to a young person in the street who comes from a very poor family, as we know that our society is overall poor, and there is a high inequality in South Africa. I don't have words of encouragement for such a person. And as a professional, I am a bit disappointed with the situation in our country. I am not saying there is no light, but I am of a belief that we are not doing enough as intellectuals, as leaders. And I don't believe that this country doesn't have money. There's something wrong. So what I want to put to her is to tell us, what is she seeing as an opportunity? How can we enliven the situation? Because society is dying, morality is dying. We see Nyaope people. This is a phenomenon which we never knew of, and it's the majority of our youth. They are there in the streets, and this is our situation. And unless we address the issue of inequality, according to me, there is no way we can address the issue of corruption. There is no way we can address the issue of morality. Thank you.
Good evening. Speaking is Onkatlile Mbele. I am a BA Communications student here at Unisa. Please, it's my first time here, so I'd like to ask this question to both our panelists, if I can say, more so to our millennial panelist. To rather say, myself, as a Gen Z generation, I want to ask, more in particular as a Unisa student, how can we partake into these lectures as the Gen Z generation and be able to play an active role towards grooming our peers as well? because why do I say that? We as students, more particularly, as you can see, we are Gen Z. And as the years go by, we want to learn about our history and know about our culture. Because as they say that you can't go forward if you don't know where you come from. So I believe, how can we, as the Gen Z generation, partake? Because like when I heard about this lecture tonight, it was through myself researching more on the Unisa website. And as a student, I want to play a role into my institution as well and partake in these lectures. Thank you.
Good evening to all. My name is Owam Boyser. I am an LLB student here at Unisa. I currently have a question for each. Now, before I ask my question directly, I'd just like to paint a scenario real quick. The preamble states, "We the people." I want to focus on that, we the people. A child walks into a library, let's say the Joburg Library or the National Library. The child wants knowledge, but no one is there to guide the child. I view, me personally speaking, I view we the people as the child. No one is there to guide us in the sense of access to information. With that said, how then do we, as the people, who still have the will of fire in the sense of hope, pass the baton on to the next generation? That question is directed to our keynote speaker. My next question, which comes from a personal experience. Level 5 lockdown, I'm heading towards, right here in Sunnyside. Unlawfully arrested. I wasn't read my rights. How, in my mind, I'm processing all of this that's unfolding. From viewing it in the sense of intellectual, whether it's intellectual property in the sense of your ownership being stolen from you, you created something and now it's taken from you, or whether it's in the sense of your train of thoughts or your beliefs, I'm going to view it in the sense of your mental state. How do we then tell the younger generation, the future, who we are supposed to protect, who we are supposed to be role models for, how do we tell them that knowledge is power? Knowledge and intellectuality can come together. Use that to create a better tomorrow when the people who are supposed to be serving and protecting us are not serving and protecting us. That question is directed to you. And to close off, I'd just like to state that I do acknowledge there's probably, let's say, 100+ people in this room. The concept of reality can be different. One person's reality will be different to the other person's reality because of how they view it. Please help me, please help enlighten me in that regard. Thank you.
Both our keynote speaker and the millennial, as he was called, to respond to the questions. So a majority of the questions are really about the intergenerational issues. You know, the fact that a sense from young people that the current older generation has failed. I can't say us, I don't belong with the young people. Has failed the younger people. So that's the first point. But the other element of the questions that are coming forward is, and in now with this situation, who are young people meant to emulate if the older generation is really messing up as has happened? How do we even start to speak about justice when we have such deep-seated inequalities in our society? The issue of also how do we address historical atrocities in the context of peace and reconciliation? May I request first the advocate to look at that, the grooming of peers. I was very encouraged by the question that says, us as Gen Z perhaps we can play an active role in grooming our peers. So therefore, the questions that are coming forward are, yes, on the one hand, we lay blame on the older generation and we hold them accountable for what they've done and their shortcomings. And yet at the same time, what are we as young people then we could do in terms of carrying forward our society? May we hear from Advocate?
Thank you, Dr. Tom. I'm going to start with the first question that Mr. Gumede asked, and it's about outstanding cases, justice, peace, about our past. How do we move forward when we haven't dealt with our past? Is that an accurate summary, Ms. Gumede, I'm looking at your colleague at the back, but is that more or less an accurate summary of what you're asking? Working towards creating a tail end. I'm sure this morning I haven't interrogating old TRC cases and trying to take steps to resolve some of those outstanding issues. So my short answer, it's not the only answer to your question, but my first and short answer is, I believe that the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development is seized with this matter. And I believe that they will find the resources to deal with it. I would like to believe that one of the reasons we have not been able to effectively deal with some of those old TRC cases is because of resources, quite frankly. There are so many demands on the public purse that selections have to be made, you know, in the same way as competing constitutional rights. Really, as I came to understand how government works in the short time I spent there, resources, resources, resources. It's the allocation of those. But I must say this as well, possibly as part of my conclusion. There is a particular matter that I presided in as a member of the Amnesty Committee. This particular security branch officer, I think he was an Askari, has the National Prosecuting Authority has now initiated prosecution in his case. I happen to have a copy of the papers because I was one of the members who took a decision that amnesty should not be granted to that particular person. And I was requested to assist one of the parties, I think it was one of the amici, in progressing that particular matter. I said no, I would not. Because number one, it's a matter I decided long ago. I'm not going to start trying to remember the what and the how. But more importantly, you know, in law we have the principle of if you're unhappy with a judge's decision or a decision maker's decision, take it to the next level. I'm functus officio. I took a decision. There's a record of that decision. Let young people with energy look at that record impartially, fairly, and see if the decision we took was correct, or if the challenge this particular person is bringing to the fact that he is now being prosecuted 20 years later, is one of his complaints, is a fair and just process that our government is undertaking. So I share that with you only because, fortunately enough, I'm involved, or I was involved in that particular amnesty committee. And so I know that there is definitely a prosecution that's underway. But I think also that there's a lot of energy that you have to put into just the prosecutorial services generally. So we need to decide as South Africans which site of struggle should be our first port of call, second port of call, which ones we can run at a parallel level. My understanding, again, because I was involved in the Zondo Commission, is we really need to clean up government and the corporate sector. I mean, I was listening to the Steinhoff issue, 21 billion. So it's not just government, it's us as South Africans. We need to focus and tick, then move to the next one. But if we truly believe that our past is hampering us, it's stopping us from making progress, then we must say, can resources, as the people of this country, be allocated to that site of struggle and not put it on the back burner as we have over the last few years, and I believe for good reason. I don't know if that helps in at least just bringing some light that government's not sleeping on the job. I believe that they are willing and able and have a new energy to look into the old TRC cases. If I might leave that answer as it is. Can I then move on to where we are going to find the face of the next generation, as O.R. Tambo did with Madiba? You have to find millennials and generation whatever, Z, my son says generation Z. You have to find those role models. Interestingly enough, when we were, in our day, putting together the Constitutional Assembly, that was in the 90s, we had Cyril Ramaphosa and Rolf Meyer, who were the face of the Constitutional Assembly. We managed to find people then that were appropriate drivers of what we needed to do. You young people have got to find fora where you can discuss what you want to see happen in this country. That national dialogue is going to happen. Make your presence felt. Be there. Air your views. Write. I don't know how many of you find the time to go to Parliament sometimes, because parliamentary processes are open, most of them. They're open. You can sit there, number one, and not just listen to the debates. You can share your views when there is an open public participation process. So if this dialogue of ours is going to take the form of an open public participation process, get involved in it. If you read that certification judgment, you will find that what the court, the Constitutional Court, had to look at were a whole lot of objections from various people, organizations, stakeholders, objections to the formulation of the provisions of the Constitution. So again, I go back to that national dialogue, which I hope will take off. Write submissions when submissions are open. Don't think somebody else is going to do it. Come to these lectures. The Thabo Mbeki School of Governance. I was here a few weeks ago. Ntate Mbeki was addressing young people, old people, all of us who had the time and energy to come here. And the question I asked about why are we such a violent society is a question he threw back at us in the audience. He said we must interrogate this. So again, as you have done this evening, people put up their hands, they gave views. Hopefully somebody has recorded that. And we must then sit down and make sure that we find ways. I don't know, in our political parties, there are very many political parties now. I don't know. I mean, just be creative. Find ways of getting involved. Inequality, Professor Dr. Advocate. Inequality is a big issue. Again, I like to personalize things. By sheer chance, I was working last night, but my dearest husband happened to be watching Celeste Ntuli, a podcast, Yaha Celeste Ntuli. So I kept popping into, because I love her to bits, popping in and then going back to the work I was doing, an assignment that's due. I liked this thing she said, because the question to her was, what educational qualifications do you have? And she said, me, none. She says, I went to 2 tertiary institutions. I didn't finish at either one of them. At the second one, I was in second year. I was getting ready to do third year. And I got a job. I realized that I didn't have to bother my parents. I could go out there and work. And that's what I did. But she says, if you look for faces on billboards, all those educated people, my face is on billboards. And the reason for that, she says, is because I have worked. She says, I have built stages, I have done production X. That woman she's a doctor in her own right, just having listened to what she has done without a single degree to her name, from a background where money wasn't lying around all over the place. And she said what it is she had a will to succeed. And she continues to have a will to succeed. And I thought to myself, I would love to sit down and just have a conversation with her. Maybe Unisa should invite her to this memorial lecture and say to her, with young people, this place must be full of young people, and ask Celeste Ntuli to share her story with you. I take my hat off to that woman. So inequality doesn't pull you down. You know, she used an example. She said, hey, bakono engineer who sit underneath bridges instead of building bridges. What's wrong with them? They must find ways of getting themselves some skoropana or the other, something along those lines. She is a motivational speaker of note. Yes, you get a good laugh out of listening to her, but goodness me, the substance in everything she says, even when you're getting a good laugh. I recommend you either find that podcast or you get Dr. Tong to invite her to come here. All of us will be here. And the pearls of wisdom you'll get from that woman on inequality and how to overcome it will be better than anything I've said to you tonight. Ntate Mbele, grooming our peers, how do we participate in these lectures? I think if they invite Celeste Ntuli, you will all be here. So I'm encouraging them. But bringing people who actually you want to listen to. You know, we talk about role models, people who we will follow. Bring people like that who we will listen to. And in a sense, you know, Dr. Tong, I'm honored that you asked me to come to this lecture. You know, we've always complained, what are the same old faces, same old, same old. I'm not the same old. Linkponi, maybe. I'm old, but not same. But okay, fair enough. The Zondo Commission, you saw me at the Zondo Commission, but generally speaking, I'm not of that caliber of woman leader who you see all the time everywhere. Yet, Unisa had the confidence to say to somebody like me, I like to say, Nke advocate hela. And people say, how hela? You're an advocate. Fair enough. But bring people like me. There's so many of us out there, men and women who can come and share pearls of wisdom with you. I can find them for you at the Johannesburg bar and at a couple of other bars. Easy from a legal perspective. There are doctors, lawyers, teachers. Abefundisi. I'm a member of Umanyano. I can find Mama Bomanyano, praying women who can come and talk to you about how they have overcome inequality and poverty. So, back to the Celeste story. Don't throw your hands in the air and say, oh, how are we going to cope? Oh, how will we manage? Thank you. Next, last one. No one there to guide us. unlawful arrest. How do we tell future generation that knowledge is power? You live knowledge is power. That's how you tell them. You role model it. So we have a rule at the bar, for instance, Johannesburg Bar, where you bring baby juniors into a brief. And if there's nobody who will pay them, you, the senior, pay them from your own pocket. That's just a rule we have. Many people live by that rule. It's voluntary. Why can't other professions do that? In our church, adopt a family. You who have, adopt a family. You who have the privilege of having an education. Sorry, now I'm like, go to church and say to them, your outreach programs, can I go to that school, go Deep Slot, or that school, go go Alex, or wherever, go Claremont, where we are from, or Tsabash. Can I go and spend an hour literally just reading incwadi ebhalwe ngesiZulu, just reading to the littlies? You know, the Bella Act is saying that grade R is going to be a must-do. I don't know where government is going to find the resources, but grade R is going to be a class that will be populated by many, many, many children. Put your hands up. You can read. Go and read to those little ones. I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter. Goodness me, we struggle just with writing numbers back to front. Go and offer to help in your own communities, to help those 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds who are at creche with teachers who are overworked. That's how we're going to pull ourselves out of the difficulties that we find ourselves in, because we here are the role models that those young children are going to learn from. Zach, I think this is yours.
So I got, thank you. So thankfully, I didn't get any of the legal questions. It's a big surprise. Starting with the participation one, I can't see the gentleman, the Gen Z, the podium is blocking me, but first and foremost, you are participating now. And I want to tip my hat to you for standing up and being actively involved in this session. It's a testament to you, but it's also indicative of how you can further participate moving forward. And that is very much leaning on the university. It's important, in my view, that we always bear in mind the nature of the relationships of the institutions that we're at, whether it be educational, whether it be faith-based, whether it be work. Unisa, here on this program, it says it's about defining tomorrow. They have an obligation and a responsibility to you to allow you to be part and parcel of platforms that can help grow you, that can help educate you, and that can help propel you forward. The second part of that question, and because you study communications, I'll frame it in a communications lens. When you talk about galvanizing your peers, the question that you need to ask yourself is, what is in it for your peers? And ultimately, what is the benefit of the collective participation of you and those around you? When you can frame that benefit to them, being able to onboard them into whatever narrative, whatever conversation that you think needs to be had becomes much easier, because they can see a direct impact that being part and parcel of these platforms, participating in these conversations can have, whether it be now in university or in the future once they've left. And practicing here, if you decide to pursue a career in communications, that will hold you in good stead. Then the second question about the unlawful arrest and why should we tell our children or future generations that pursue education. It's quite funny, actually. The question isn't funny, but it's quite serendipitous that on the way here I was having a very similar conversation with my mother, and I was berating her. I said, you know, when I was growing up, you told me if I would just work hard, if I got a good education, if I did ABC, X, Y, and Z, I'd be okay. And every year, I can't afford groceries even more. Every year, it's harder for me to pay off my car. Every year, I find myself worse off having worked harder, following the advice that you gave me, than I was the year prior. So why did you tell me to do these things? And I say this because it's iterative of your question around education. Her response to me was, what would you have as the alternative? And that really struck home because it's a question of not whether or not it is an absolute that this will resolve things in life, that it will stop you from being disempowered, from having people arresting you without cause, from having people taking things from you from a position of power that your education cannot impact. Rather, what it does is that it mitigates the level of disempowerment that you have to experience. And as you rightly say, everyone has their own lived experience. Everyone has a different perception of reality. And in order to find a common denominator where you can communicate with people that are either for you or against you as per what you went through, education can be that common denominator, and it can help you navigate things in a way that would otherwise leave you in a worse situation. So to that end, I strongly advise, yes, education all the way. But over and above that, it's not about education being there to fulfill the promises of what the previous generations have said it would do. It's about being able to allow us to be empowered to navigate life in a more effective fashion, if that makes sense. Cool.
What I take from the Q&A session is two things. On the one hand, is that it's up to us to take agency. Yes, there are all these difficulties in society. There's inequality, there's injustice, there's all of this that exists. However, at an individual level, we need to feel empowered enough and believe that we have a sense of agency ourselves to do something about any situation that we'd like to see turning out differently. I'm certainly encouraged by younger people who feel that there is a role they can play and they should play. I can tell you that the life that I have now, I have precisely because as a student, I took active part in student politics. That shaped me, that gave me tools that I couldn't get in the classroom, that gave me opportunities to serve, that gave me opportunities to learn how to be a leader. When I chair a meeting this day, I look back to the days when I had to learn as a student leader in a branch meeting of some school then. How do you chair a meeting? What are you supposed to do? How do you summarize the conversation? How do you do all of that? So I certainly believe that students are not I should not be generalizing, need to appreciate the opportunities that exist today that didn't exist then. But as an institution, yes, Unisa will create platforms. This we take to heart. We will create platforms and various platforms at which young people will have an opportunity to engage in this intergenerational dialogue that Advocate recommended that we look into doing, and then to have the opportunity to, to learn from each other. That we should do, and we will do. As the University of South Africa, we are blessed to live in a city that houses the majority of our diplomatic community. We don't take this lightly. We create many opportunities at which the sharing of wisdom also takes place. And yeah, so we will create the opportunities for you, but we also ask that you take agency and do the necessary and do what needs to be done. Advocate, I'm glad that you touched at societal level, the church, the family, and other spaces at which you could play a role. I believe all of us have a role to play in that regard to create the type of society that we say we want. One thought, though, I will leave with you, Advocate, if you'll allow me, if you'll indulge me. The thing of the TRC, I do take the point that it is about resources, but I have often wondered if there is indeed enough political will to really, really deal with the outstanding TRC matters. Personally, I don't feel that I have seen evidence of enough political will to handle those matters, but that is just my view. But I'm not discounting the resources element. I think they are there as well. Ladies and gentlemen, unless you are satisfied, right, with the answers? Absolutely satisfied and hungry. Yes. And we are then going to move to the next part of the program. I'll call my next colleague to come forward. Thank you so much. And thanks for this session. Let's give them the last round of applause.
Thank you very much. Dr. Molapo, I know that we've been in your house for quite a long time now, including you, Ms. Masales, as one of our hosts. Can we try at least maybe to be quicker? Because I see we all passed dinner or supper. Ms. Natasha, the current acting CEO of Oliver and Adelaide Tambo, I want you to come and give us your remarks regarding what has been said today. I just want to do a brief about you. Is it okay? No, that's correct. I've been told that supper is ready, so we must try to be short. May we give a round of applause so that he can come to the phone?
It really helps. I thought I was tall. I'm clearly not tall. It is awful to be the last speaker because everyone is starving, and rightfully so. But also, and more importantly, because everyone has covered so much about the incredible legacy of OR, but allow me. So, distinguished speakers, honored guests, I stand on the protocol, thank you, that has already been observed this evening. I'm going to try and rush through this but while still being coherent. It is a privilege to address you today as we reflect on the enduring leadership ideals of Oliver Reginald Tambo and his relevance in advancing Africa's intellectual and ethical growth. In considering Tambo's legacy, it is clear that his vision went beyond mere political independence. He championed a future where ethical leadership and intellectual empowerment would be the cornerstones of Africa's rebirth. In today's context, his ideals serve as both a blueprint and a challenge to us, reminding us that leadership rooted in integrity and a commitment to constitutionalism is vital if we are going to move Africa forward intellectually. As we gather under the theme of this evening, it is fitting to ask, as Advocate Natash did, how do we extend Tambo's values into the present day? The answer lies in our approach to governance, education, and moral leadership. Tambo believed in a just society where democracy wasn't just a political formality, but a system that uplifted the lives of the people, all the people. His leadership ideals emphasize that intellectual progress cannot thrive without ethical underpinnings, especially in a continent striving to reclaim its future. At the core of his beliefs was the notion of servant leadership, as has been touched on this evening. He was a selfless leader who placed the collective welfare way above any sort of personal gain. This is the kind of leadership we need today to address the pressing challenges we face, whether it's building strong democratic institutions or promoting intellectual independence across Africa. In this respect, Tambo's legacy aligns closely with the ongoing discussions on constitutionalism. As noted in tonight's lecture, ethical leadership is essential to realizing the promise of our constitutional frameworks. The nexus between ethical leadership and intellectual growth cannot be overstated. The more our leaders espouse integrity, accountability, and fairness, the more trust they will foster within society. In turn, this trust allows for the flourishing of intellectualism, the building of strong institutions, and the development of policies that align with our African values. Tambo himself embodied the intersection between ethics and intellect, understanding that without moral governance, the pursuit of knowledge loses its anchor. But it's not all about political and public leaders. As Advocate Tabashe mentioned, in our homes, communities, and workplaces, we all have a role to play as active citizens in advancing these values. We must reflect on the question posed in tonight's lecture: what has happened to ethical leadership at the family level, the very foundation of society? If we neglect the moral development of our youth, we risk stunting Africa's intellectual future. That being said, I want to reflect on all the great values we've spoken about, but highlight one that I don't believe we've spoken about enough tonight, and that's OR's value of Pan-Africanism. Through doing this, I want to reflect on the work, a particular project of the Tambo Foundation, especially as it pertains to Africa's intellectual future. I think it's important to note this project called the OR Tambo Africa Research Chairs Initiative. This project was launched in 2017 and has installed 10 science research chairs at 7 universities across the continent. The purpose of this project is to further develop Africa's intellectual future, while simultaneously, and very importantly, fostering African unity and integrating the values for which OR stood into the very fabric of the chairs, their research, and scientific development on this continent. For the Foundation, this is especially important work given the spate of xenophobia and more especially Afrophobia displayed by South Africans in recent years. Behavior completely antithetical to Tambo's unwavering commitment to this continent and to the concept of Pan-Africanism. In executing this project and in the work of the Foundation in general, we highlight the importance that Tambo placed on African unity, thought leadership, and African intellectualism. We highlight his passion for science and education as a whole, and we highlight Tambo's inherent belief in the potential of Africans to find African solutions for not only African problems, but global ones too. This initiative not only assists the Foundation in our mandate of promoting, preserving, and protecting the legacies of Oliver and Adelaide Tambo, but also enables us to pass the baton to a new generation of young people who can learn from OR's principled stance and commitment to ethical leadership, integrity, and accountability. In closing, I would like to emphasize that reclaiming Africa's intellectual future requires intentional effort. It requires that we draw from Tambo's selflessness, his beliefs in the rule of law, and his relentless pursuit of justice. In the earlier stages of childhood development, we must educate the next generation to not just be thinkers, but to be ethical thinkers. Is it easy? Absolutely not, especially in the face of the plethora of social ills we face daily. But if nothing else, take this away tonight. The liberation movement embodied courage in the face of adversity. And as OR said, the fight for freedom must go on until it's won. Until our country is free and happy and peaceful as part of the community of man, we cannot rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause, please. Thank you, Ms. Allie. I think it's time for closing remarks and the vote of thanks. And I do have Prof. Mfariseni Budeli Namakonde, the Executive Dean from the College of Law, who will be doing that for us. You can give a round of applause while she's coming. But before you say something, Prof, I just want to say the last part from ourselves as the program directors, to say that after the vote of thanks, there will be something that is served on the other side. Can we start with the main table? Then the rest of other dignitaries and the rest of us will follow. From ourselves as program directors, good night. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm being corrected because of supper or dinner. We do have gifts. I think after Prof do the vote of thanks, I will ask Dr. Molapo and Ms. Masales to come and be able to give the gifts to our guests for today. A round of applause, please.
Wow. What an illuminating evening. Where do I start? It is really hard to know where to begin with the concluding remarks. Advocate Tabek, can't we just resolve to continue this into tomorrow? I'm aware that I'm the one standing between you and dinner and going home. So I will try to be brief. Thank you, Program Director, for the opportunity. Ndi madekwana. Lokovera. As we reach the conclusion of this profound and inspiring fourth Oliver Reginald Tambo annual lecture, hosted by this esteemed university, the University of the Land, I would like to take a moment and reflect on the significance of today's gathering. The theme of this year's lecture, Integrating Constitutionalism and Ethical Leadership to Reclaim Africa's Intellectual Futures, is fitting, or rather, is a fitting tribute to the life and the work of Ntate Oliver Tambo. His unwavering commitment to justice, constitutionalism, and ethical leadership laid the foundation for the freedoms we enjoy today. You will agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that Ntate Oliver Tambo was a beacon of moral integrity, a man who valued ethical leadership and upheld the principles of justice and equality. His vision extended beyond the liberation of South Africa to the collective future of Africa, one where intellect, innovation, and ethical leadership would guide us to a stronger and more unified continent. In the course of this lecture, we have been reminded of the importance of constitutionalism as a foundation for good governance that protects and promotes human rights, democratic principles, and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, constitutionalism, when combined with ethical leadership, offers us a roadmap for reclaiming our intellectual heritage and ensuring that Africa's future is not only bright, but also sustainable. Our discussion today brought forth ideas that challenge us not only to think, but to think deeply and critically about how we can continue to build institutions that embody these values. We must, therefore, colleagues, encourage a new generation of leaders, intellectuals, scholars, and policymakers who will honor our rich traditions while embracing the innovations necessary for the future, just as Ntate Oliver Reginald Tambo fought for throughout his life. Like our distinguished guest speaker for this evening, Senior Counsel Advocate Tabashe, I firmly believe that Africa's intellectual futures can be reclaimed and strengthened through education, dialogue, and collaboration. On that note, colleagues, I wish to express my sincere gratitude to the following individuals who made this evening possible. To you, Moipone, Masales, the Regional Director of Unisa Gauteng region, thank you so much for setting the scene for today's memorial lecture. Your introduction laid a strong foundation for the discussions that followed, framing the theme, integrating constitutionalism and ethical leadership to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures with clarity and insight. Your thoughtful reflections this evening helped to highlight the relevance of this theme in today's context. Thank you for your invaluable contribution and for reminding us of the significance of ethical leadership in reclaiming Africa's intellectual heritage. We are truly obliged. I would also like to express my profound gratitude to Dr. Matsidiso Mulapo, our acting vice principal responsible for strategy, risk, and advisory services. We thank you, Doc, for your thoughtful and inspiring welcome, which underscored the importance of upholding the legacies of leaders like Ntate O.R. Tambo while we navigate the challenges of our time. We are truly grateful to you for opening this important platform and give us an opportunity to engage in such a meaningful discussion. We also thank you, Doc, for graciously introducing our guest speaker for this evening. To our guest speaker for this evening, Advocate Leah Tabashe. On behalf of the University of South Africa and the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, Senior Counsel, for your invaluable contribution to the 4th Oliver Reginald Tambo Annual Memorial Lecture. The theme for this year's lecture, integrating constitutionalism and ethical leadership to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures, could not be more timely or relevant, because we find ourselves at a critical juncture where the principles of justice, good governance, and ethical leadership are essential to addressing the challenges facing our continent. Advocate Tabashe, your thought-provoking reflections on how we can align constitutionalism with ethical leadership have resonated deeply with us. Tonight, you have reminded us of the enduring legacy of Ntate Oliver Tambo, whose visionary leadership laid foundations for the principles of justice, equality, and ethical governance that continue to shape our country today. Your emphasis on reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures speaks to the core of our responsibilities as academics, legal practitioners, and citizens of this continent, that it is not enough to simply uphold the Constitution. We must lead with integrity, ensuring that future generations are equipped to address the complex challenges of our time with wisdom and moral courage. As we reflect on your words this evening, we are reminded of the work that lies ahead in nurturing the next generation of African leaders. Leaders who will honor the value of constitutionalism and ethical leadership. Leaders who will contribute to the growth and transformation of our continent with conviction and purpose. Once again, Advocate, thank you for sharing your profound insights with us tonight. Your dedication to justice and ethical leadership is an inspiration to all of us, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue you have so powerfully initiated this night or this evening. Thank you so much. To our respondent for this evening, the grandson, Zachary Kingston. Thank you so much for honoring our invite and for your response and for being part of this important event on the calendar of the University of South Africa. Your insights and reflections are particularly meaningful as they connect us not only to the theme of this lecture, but also to the enduring legacy of your grandfather, whose life and leadership continue to inspire our pursuit of justice, equality, and ethical governance. Hearing from you to the CEO of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, Ms. Natash Allie. We thank you for representing the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation this evening. Your presence here today and the continued work of the foundation is a testament to the enduring legacy of both Ntate Oliver and Mme Adelaide Tambo. Thank you for your unwavering commitment to preserving and promoting their legacy and for the vital role the foundation plays in fostering ethical leadership across the continent. To the Tambo family, thank you for allowing us the privilege to honor this remarkable legal giant. We are also grateful for your attendance this evening. Your presence is a profound honor as it serves as a living reminder of the great legacy of Ntate Oliver Tambo, a man whose vision for Africa continues to inspire us. We thank you for your continued support. To the organizers, those who worked tirelessly behind the scene, thank you for your dedication and for bringing this event to life. Your efforts have ensured that the legacy of Ntate Oliver Tambo continues to be celebrated, and his vision for ethical leadership in Africa remains at the forefront. Our program directors, Dr. Tong, Ntate Kaba, and Ntate Mulefe, thank you so much for your exceptional guidance and leadership as program facilitators. Your professionalism and skillful coordination ensured the smooth flow of today's proceedings, and for that we are grateful. It will be remiss of me to forget our sign language specialist, or rather specialists as they are too. Medi Makatso, Mutimele, and Ntate Kamukhelo Ramoloja. Your dedication and expertise have ensured that this event is inclusive and accessible to all, allowing everyone to fully engage with the discussions and presentations, and for that we thank you. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you, the attendees, both physically and virtually, distinguished guests, scholars, and students who participated in today's discourse. Your presence and engagements are testament to the fact that the conversations on Africa's intellectual future is alive and vibrant. Ladies and gentlemen, it is through collective effort, reflection, and action that we will build the Africa that Ntate Oliver Tambo envisioned. Let us go forward together, united in our commitment to a brighter future for Africa. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry, Prof. Excuse, Prof. I think maybe it's the step here. And clearly you did indicate they are the one that is standing between us and supper. Distinguished guests, may I please request Dr. Molapo and Ms. Masales to come closer to the bench. I don't know which side, Dr. Tong, whether they can come and give presents to our esteemed guests, because I'm trying to find the right spot where they can be able to take a picture. Our photographer, if it's possible, can you please come and do the honors? The marketing team, if whether maybe the presents, which ones? Advocate, ne? Okay. Let me just call Advocate, can you please come to the fore? Can we give a round of applause as a sign of acknowledgement? I think I need to fix the issue of this site because this place is a bit higher. Ntate Kaba, please come this side so that we can be able to fix this thing. Can you please make sure that you give it to Mama as we take in the picture? From the Tambo family, Zachary, I'm told that you should come through around. Ms. Natasha Allie, the acting CEO, please come to the podium. Applause. I'll ask the team to come and do the ushering from the reserved tables. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good night. Can I have the entertainment team to come and entertain us while we are enjoying ourselves with water on the tables?